The slap of his hand on the wood sounded like it hit my face. "Your Honor, she embarrasses me," my father said, palm flat on the rail, voice booming through the county courtroom. "I am ashamed she's my daughter." The gallery laughed the way small-town crowds do, half at the joke, half because they're afraid not to. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, crisp navy blazer collar digging into my throat. My hands stayed folded on the plaintiff's table, knuckles white against the black fabric. I'd spent years learning how not to flinch under fire. Somehow, my father's voice still found the softest part of me. Judge Weller didn't laugh. He just sat there on the high bench, silver hair haloed by the fluorescent lights, thumb resting on a thick manila folder. The same manila folder my command had overnighted from Norfolk. The same one my father thought was some generic employment record for his failed daughter who ran off to play sailor. "You're ashamed of her." The judge's tone was mild, dangerous. "We'll come back to that, Mr. Carter." My father, Ed to everyone but me, leaned back with a satisfied grunt. His lawyer, Macmillan, smirked at me like we were at a pep rally and he'd just scored. The old wooden clock on the wall ticked too loudly. My dress shoes felt welded to the floor. I had defended sailors accused of war crimes with less adrenaline in my veins. "Lieutenant Carter," Judge Weller said, eyes dropping to the folder again, "you'll have your turn to respond. Sit tight." I nodded once, voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor." No one in that room heard the rank. They heard lieutenant like it was a phase, like it was a pretend title from some other planet. They knew me as the weird bookish girl from Maple Creek who left at 18 and only came back for funerals. They knew my brother Tyler, golden boy who never left, like he was the rightful heir to everything my mother and grandfather ever built. They thought I was here to cling to a house and a bank account. They had no idea the only reason I was sitting upright was because of the woman whose will we were all pretending to honor. Mom. Growing up, this courtroom had been a rumor more than a place. We drove past its red brick and white columns on the way to school and the grocery store. My father would point at it and say, "That's where people go when they don't handle their business like men." My mother would squeeze the steering wheel a little tighter. In our house, handling your business meant doing whatever Ed wanted and pretending it was love. I learned to be quiet early. Easier to disappear into books and homework than to compete with Tyler's trophies and my father's voice. At every school concert, the applause felt like it belonged to my brother by default. I was background noise with a flute. "Olivia's the smart one," my mother would say, trying to make it sound like a compliment. My father would snort. "Smart doesn't pay bills, she'll learn." He loved saying she'll learn. It meant he was right and the world would prove it for him. I watched him waste nights at the bar, watched overdue envelopes pile on the kitchen counter, watched my mother slice coupons and smile like we were fine. Under the table, she'd tap my knee twice, the Morse code she made up for "stay small." Then Grandpa Joe died. The only person who ever told my father no without flinching disappeared one autumn morning, and the foundation of our family shifted by half an inch. No one else noticed the tilt. I did. Grandpa's will didn't leave much. A truck older than me, a half-paid-off ranch house my parents immediately moved into, a savings account that looked bigger on paper than it felt in reality. What it really left me was a question. What happens when there's no one left to stand between a man and all the people he thinks he owns? I was 16 when I told my mother I wanted to join the Navy. We were standing at the sink, steam fogging the window, the smell of dish soap and overcooked spaghetti in the air. "ROTC is one thing," she whispered. "But active duty? Honey, your father will say." "I know what he'll do," I said, voice steady. "I'm doing it anyway." She closed her eyes like I'd told her I was terminally ill. "He'll say you're ungrateful. He'll say you're running away." "I'm not running away," I said. "I'm running towards something." Later that night, I left a brochure for the JAG Corps on the kitchen table. The glossy page with the Navy lawyer in dress whites looked nothing like me. Not yet. My father picked it up, read the first line. "Serve your country as a Navy attorney," and barked a laugh so loud it rattled the salt shaker. "An attorney?" he said. "You? What, you think you're better than us now?" I didn't answer. He crumpled the brochure and tossed it toward the trash. It missed, landing on the linoleum like a cheap prophecy. You'll learn, he muttered, heading for the fridge. World doesn't need another mouthy woman in uniform. I picked the brochure off the floor, smoothed it out, and slid it into my backpack. In my mother's dresser drawer, beneath her folded sweaters and the scent of lavender sachets, I hid my enlistment papers. The day I shipped out, she found them anyway, hands shaking as she traced my signature. Is this what you want? She whispered. It's the first thing I've really wanted that isn't about him, I said. Yes. She pressed the papers to her chest like a letter from God, then handed them back. Then go, she said. And don't you dare come back smaller than you left. I didn't. I came back in uniform. I came back a sailor, then a law student, then a Navy JAG officer with a commission pinned to my chest and a deployment rotation on my calendar. My father turned my commissioning photo face down on the mantel. Cute costume, he said. My mother cried in the laundry room so he wouldn't see. For years after, I sent money home when I could, helped with medical bills when Grandpa's widow, the real grandma, not the one who remarried out of loneliness later, slipped on ice and shattered her hip. Flew home twice on emergency leave when my mother broke down and whispered, It's bad, Liv. Your father's drinking is worse than ever. I never stayed long. It was easier to love my mother from a distance than to watch her shrink in person. Then the mammogram came back. Then the lump. Then the words no one in a small town knows how to say without whispering. Cancer. Now it was all reduced to 3 names at the top of a case file. Estate of Margaret Carter, applicant Edward Carter, respondent Olivia Carter, or, as everyone in the courtroom knew us, Ed, the wronged widower. Tyler, the golden son. Olivia, the cold daughter who ran off and only came back when there was money on the table. My father had spent months in diners and church halls telling anyone who'd listen that his only child worth a damn was Tyler, that I'd abandoned my mother on her deathbed. The truth lived in a different folder. Not the manila one on the judge's bench. The blue one in my mother's nightstand, next to half-used bottles of pain pills and a flyer for hospice. The one where she wrote every visitor, every night I slept in that hospital chair, every time Ed went out for air and didn't come back for hours. Just so someone knows, she whispered the first night she made me write with her. If he ever tries to tell it like I imagine he will. Back then, I thought she was being paranoid. I hadn't seen the petition yet. I hadn't read the line where my father swore under oath that I rarely, if ever, came to see her, that I refused to help. I hadn't seen his handwriting next to words like undue influence and diminished capacity. I hadn't seen my own name on the line after V. I saw it all the week before court. I read every lie twice. Then, I did what my uniform had trained me to do. I built a case that... Judge Weller flipped open the manila folder, the paper whispering like a warning. Lieutenant Carter, he said, not looking at me yet. We'll come back to you after a brief recess. I want to read the entirety of this record before I ask you a single question. He glanced over his glasses at my father. And, Mr. Carter, he added, voice still calm, I strongly suggest you sit down and stop touching people in my courtroom. My father dropped into his seat like a stone. My cheek burned where his hand had landed. The sting felt like childhood, like Thanksgiving plates smashed for being too fancy, like science fair ribbons tossed aside because they weren't trophies with balls on them. I put my fingers flat on the cool table surface and breathed the way I did before stepping into a tribunal. In for 4, hold, out for 4. The badges on my blazer felt suddenly heavier. They weren't decorations, they were receipts. Part of me wanted to stand and shout the truth right then and there, to rip open the blue folder I'd tucked beneath my chair and read my mother's words until everyone in that room had to look at who he really was. But I'd learned to fight differently. Chain of command, procedure, let the record speak. So I sat. I watched the judge read. And for the first time since I was a kid in Maple Creek, I let myself imagine a future where my father's voice was no longer the loudest thing in every room, where someone with actual authority would finally look at the evidence and say, Sir, you really don't know, do you? The first time I watched my mother die, the monitor said 0317. Navy hospitals taught me to watch numbers, Oxygen saturation, blood pressure, morphine drip. Civilian hospitals smelled the same, disinfectant and canned vegetables, but the hallway voices were softer, less used to shouting over alarms. I spent 32 nights in that oncology ward. My father spent 9. Tyler spent 3. The blue notebook lived on the side table next to the styrofoam cups and the cheap ballpoint pen that always seemed to be out of ink. Date, time, who came, how long they stayed, my mother said, wincing as she shifted. The chemo had stolen her hair, but not her clarity. Not because I want to catch anyone. Because I know your father. He'll tell the story he can live with. I want you to have the story that's true. I don't need... You do, she said. You just don't know it yet. So I wrote. Nove 3, 1945. Olivia arrived, stayed all night. Nov 4, 0810. Ed arrived, left 0835, said traffic. Nov 4, 2012. Tyler texted, sorry, busy. No visit. At first it felt petty, then the absences piled up. Your father hates hospitals, she said once, trying to cover for him. They remind him of his dad. His dad died at home, I said. She smiled sadly. He hates feeling small. That's all I know. He didn't look small when he came in on day 14, reeking of whiskey, tossing paperwork onto the tray. Sign these, he said. My mother, frail as tissue, stared at the clipboard. Oh, what is it? Just bills, he said too quickly. Insurance forms. You want Tyler to be able to help, right? Just sign. The line he wanted her signature on wasn't for insurance. It was for a transfer of beneficiary. From me to him. She looked at me, then at the pen. Leave it, she said. I'm tired. That was the first time I saw my father's jaw clench like he wanted to hit her and remembered he couldn't. He looked at me instead. You did this, he snarled. You put ideas in her head. You turned her against her own family. I am her family, I said quietly. He stormed out. 10 minutes later, I wrote in the notebook. Novi 17, 1402. Ed brought forms, asked for signature, refused, witnessed. At the time, I thought the notebook might come in handy if he tried to guilt me later, the way he always did. I didn't realize it would one day sit inside a blue plastic evidence sleeve in the same manila folder a judge was now reading, with widening eyes. My path to JAG wasn't clean. The Navy taught me how to follow orders, and law school taught me how to question every one of them. I studied in mess halls, on steel benches, crouched next to generators that rattled my teeth. Sometimes I felt like an intruder in both worlds, too military for the law kids, too bookish for the line officers. Then a senior JAG, Commander Phillips, caught me hunched over a casebook at Oro 2 Huntuag in the wardroom on deployment. Carter, you planning to sue the ocean? He asked, amused. Just trying to pass contracts, sir, I said. He sat across from me, the ship rocking beneath our boots. You any good at this? He asked. Sir? He tapped my book. Arguing with paper, turning chaos into sentences. I thought of the blue notebook, of my mother's insistence, of how seeing everything written down made the world feel less crazy. Yes, sir, I said. I think I am. He wrote a number on a napkin. When you're tired of pretending you're just logistics, call this, he said. We need people who know what the real world looks like and can still believe in the rule of law. 3 years later, I stood at a JAG pinning ceremony with gold bars on my shoulders and my mother's bracelet under my cuff, feeling like I'd crawled out of the life my father wrote for me and into one I'd written myself. I sent Mom the official photo. She put it in a frame next to my kindergarten school picture and told everyone at church. My father printed it off Facebook and shoved it, to my amazement, in his dresser drawer. When you come to your senses, he told my mother, she'll need reminding of what she could have been if she'd stayed. The last time I saw my mother alive, she was propped up against 3 pillows, oxygen hissing, the winter light barely making it through the icy window. Promise me something, she said, voice thin. Anything. Don't let him turn this into a story where you're the villain. I smiled weakly. That's kind of his brand. She reached for the notebook. I mean it, she whispered. You have facts. You have dates. You have your life. If he tries to make you feel like you abandoned me, like you took from him, I didn't, I said. You know I didn't. I know, she said. But he won't. Not unless someone makes him. She tapped the blue cover. I can't make him, she said. You can. 2 weeks later, she was gone. 2 months after that, the petition arrived. Estate of Margaret Carter. Contest of will. Allegations. Undue influence by Olivia Carter. Abandonment by same. Request to void bequest and transfer full estate to surviving spouse, Edward Carter. He'd signed his name with a flourish, and beneath his lies, attached as Exhibit A, was an itemized list of every time he claimed I'd refused visits, refused calls, refused to help. None of the dates matched the blue notebook. None of them accounted for the flight receipts from Norfolk. The hospital's visitor log didn't match either. Nothing lined up except his need to be the hero of his own tragedy. I took leave, notified my command, and, by protocol, authorized release of my service record to the court. Fitness reports, deployment history, security clearances, commendations, evaluations, all of it in a sealed folder. My CO, Captain Rhodes, looked at me across his desk. You sure you don't want representation? He asked. You're JAG, but you're also family in this matter. I'll hire local counsel, I said. But sir, I need to be the one to say some of this. He nodded slowly. Then let the record do as much of the talking as it can, he said. You know better than most that judges listen to paper more than tears. So I flew home in travel khakis and a black coat, rode in coach between a screaming toddler and a businessman who hogged the armrest, and walked into Maple Creek like a ghost. In town, gossip traveled faster than my rental car. By the time I reached Harper and Dunn, everyone already knew I was trying to steal the house out from under the grieving widower. The receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes. Mr. Dunn is with your father, she said. Mr. Callahan will be with you. Callahan turned out to be the older partner, the one my grandfather had trusted before he died. He had the same tired kindness I remembered from childhood, when he'd slide a lollipop across the desk while the adults talked about deeds and insurance. He did not offer candy this time. Olivia, he said, taking my hand. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, I said. I hear my father is also sorry, to the tune of wanting every cent my mother left me. A corner of his mouth twitched. In so many words, he said. I have your mother's will. I have the hospital logs your counsel requested. And, he tapped the bulging manila folder on his desk, I have your entire military service record. I tensed. Is that a problem? Oh, not for you, he said. For Mr. Carter, I suspect it will be enlightening. He opened the will, running a finger down the familiar paragraphs. To my daughter, Lieutenant Olivia Carter, he read aloud, I leave the house at 214 Maple, all associated contents, and 70% of my remaining savings, in recognition of her sacrifices and service. He glanced up at me. She wrote that line herself, he said. Insisted on the wording. Sacrifices and service. My throat tightened. What does my father get? I asked. 30% of the cash and my condolences, Callahan said dryly. And in a separate letter, filed but not binding, she explains why. He handed me the letter. It was written in my mother's uneven end-stage handwriting, the ink smudged where her hand must have shaken. I read it twice. I, Margaret Carter, know this may hurt my husband. I love him, but love is not blindness. Olivia was here when no one else was. She held my hand, fought for my care, and lived a life of service whose details I'll never fully know. I want her to have a safe place in this world when I am gone. If he tells you a different story, check the hospital logs. Check the blue notebook. At the bottom, in smaller, almost private script, she'd scrawled, She'll know what that means. Callahan watched my face soften. The court has both the logs and the notebook, Olivia, he said. They are already in evidence. My father hadn't known that when he told everybody at the diner I'd never lifted a finger. He didn't know much. He didn't know JAG sent my complete record. He didn't know Judge Weller was a Navy veteran with a soft spot for people who served. He didn't know the manila folder on that bench contained deployments, commendations, and a performance review that used phrases like unflinching integrity, and exceptional judgment under pressure. He didn't know that in a few minutes, the judge he was trying to charm would look up from that folder and ask the question that started to unwind the story Ed had spent months spinning. "Mr. Carter," Judge Weller would say, tapping the tab with my name on it, "you keep saying your daughter has embarrassed you with the life she's chosen. Tell me, what exactly do you think your daughter does for a living?" And my father, in full view of the whole town, would lean forward and sneer, "She pushes paper for the Navy. Couldn't hack real work." Which is when Judge Weller would tilt the file, clear his throat, and say the words that finally cut my father's version of me off at the knees. "Sir, you don't know she's JAG. Sir, you don't know she's JAG?" The words dropped into the courtroom like a wrench into a quiet engine. My father blinked. "She's what?" Judge Weller adjusted his glasses, eyes still on the folder. "Judge Advocate General's Corps," he said. "Your daughter is a Navy attorney. A lieutenant in good standing, with multiple commendations." A low murmur rippled through the benches behind us. Somebody whispered, "Lawyer?" Like it didn't fit me at all. My father gave a short, skeptical laugh. "Olivia? No, she files things. She's logistics or whatever. She couldn't hack law school." The judge's eyebrows lifted a millimeter. "That's interesting," he said, "because this record shows she graduated in the top 15% of her class, passed the bar on the first attempt, and has been serving as a JAG officer for several years, including," he flipped a page, "representation in 3 courts-martial and advisory duties on 2 deployments." He looked up, really seeing me for the first time. "Lieutenant Carter," he said, "stand, please." My knees didn't quite trust me, but I rose. "Yes, Your Honor." "This record accurate?" he asked, tapping the file. "Yes, sir." He nodded, satisfied, then turned back to my father. "You've been telling this court your daughter is irresponsible, unstable, and unfit to manage an estate," he said, voice taking on a new edge. "You understand that's the basis of your petition, to strip her of what your late wife left her." "That's right," my father said, defensive. "She ran off. She let her mother die alone. She's unreliable." "Uh-huh," Weller said softly. He closed my service file and opened another folder, thinner, blue, with the hospital's logo on it. "Exhibit B," he said. "Oncology Unit Visitor Logs from St. Luke's Medical. Signed and certified by staff." He ran his finger down the first page. "From the date of Mrs. Carter's admission to the date of her passing, we have Olivia Carter, present overnight for 32 nights. Multiple daytime visits noted. Edward Carter," he glanced at my father, 9 visits of 30 to 40 minutes each. And a Tyler Carter," he tilted his head, 3 visits. Tyler shrank a little in his seat. The judge flipped another page. "Combined with Exhibit C," he said, lifting the familiar blue spiral notebook in a plastic sleeve, "which appears to be your late wife's hand-kept log of visitors and events. Same numbers, same gaps." He tapped the clear cover. "Mr. Carter, this is your handwriting here, on the petition, claiming your daughter abandoned her mother. Correct?" My father swallowed. That's how it felt." "Feelings," the judge said, "are not evidence." He held up the notebook. "This," he said, "is evidence, and it paints a very different picture of who was present and who was not." The room had gone very still. My father's face flushed a slow, ugly red. "She put that notebook there," he blurted. "She's always been manipulative. She probably told her mother to write it that way." Weller blinked once, then looked downright tired. "Mrs. Carter began this log months before her terminal diagnosis," he said. "We have entries from your father-in-law's last hospitalization years ago, long before your current disagreements. The handwriting and ink date confirm that. Your own signature appears twice as witnessed, in fact." He flipped to a page, turned the notebook toward my father. There it was. Ed Carter. Slanted, self-important, on the line where he'd watched her refuse to sign those papers. He'd forgotten he'd signed it. He started, then shut his mouth. "Here's what I see," Weller said, voice firm now. "A daughter who has served honorably as an officer in the United States Navy. A mother who, faced with death, documented who showed up. A will that is clear in its language and intent. And a husband whose testimony is contradicted by every piece of written evidence in front of me. He looked at me again. "Lieutenant Carter," he said, "sit. You'll have your chance to speak in a moment." I sank back into my seat, pulse roaring in my ears. My father's lawyer, Macmillan, tried to recover. "Your Honor, even if Ms. Carter—" "Lieutenant," Weller corrected without looking at him. "Even if Lieutenant Carter has career accomplishments," Macmillan said stiffly, "that doesn't mean she's suited emotionally to handle grief or a large inheritance. Families know these things better than records. Mr. Carter is simply trying to rewrite reality," Weller cut in. "He's entitled to his grief counsel. He is not entitled to falsify the legal record to steal his daughter's inheritance." The word steal hung over the table like smoke. My father jerked as if struck again. "I'm her father," he snapped. "I built that house. I paid those bills. That house," Weller said evenly, "was purchased jointly by you and your wife. The deed is in evidence. Your wife had every right to will her share and whatever separate property she possessed to whomever she chose. She chose your daughter." He laid a hand on the will. "And this court," he said, "takes a decedent's clearly expressed wishes very seriously." My father's mouth opened, closed. His eyes flicked to me, full of wounded outrage. "Olivia," he said, tone dripping contempt. Tell him you don't want this fight. Tell him you'll do the right thing." I met his gaze and, for the first time in my life, didn't feel smaller than it. "I am doing the right thing," I said quietly. He scoffed. "Over a pile of bricks? Over a bank account?" "This isn't about bricks," I said. "It's about Mom. And about you lying about her and me." Judge Weller rapped his gavel lightly. "All right," he said. "We're going to do this properly. Counsel, you've had your say." And he turned to me. "Lieutenant Carter, I'm going to swear you in and give you the floor." I stood again. The bailiff approached, Bible in hand, though I barely saw it. My mother's bracelet felt hot around my wrist. "Raise your right hand," he said. I did. "Do you swear to tell the truth? The whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do," I said. My voice didn't shake. It surprised me. "Have a seat on the stand," Weller said. "Start wherever you think I need to start hearing the real story." I walked to the witness box, each step measured like I was crossing a pitching deck in heavy seas. The wood creaked under my weight. I sat, adjusted the microphone, and looked at the judge. Behind him, through the high windows, Maple Creek's sky was the same washed-out winter blue it had been the day my mother died. "Your Honor," I said, "I'll start with the notebook. Because that's where my mother started when she realized someone was going to lie about what happened." My father snorted. "Oh, for one more outburst, Mr. Carter," Weller said sharply, "and I will have you removed. You've had your chance to paint your daughter as a villain. Now she gets to respond. You will listen." The room went quiet enough to hear the heating vents hum. For the first time, it felt like my words might actually land somewhere other than the plaster wall of my father's pride. I took a breath, and I began to tell the story the way it had actually happened, date by date, entry by entry, turning my mother's blue notebook into the shield she'd meant it to be, and my father's embarrassment speech into Exhibit A of why we were here at all. I rested my palm on the wooden rail and looked at the notebook in its plastic sleeve. "When Mom first went into chemo," I said, "she joked that if she didn't write things down, Dad would rewrite the movie after the credits." A few people in the back chuckled. My father stiffened. "She started the notebook for herself," I went on. "Appointments, meds, who drove her, who brought food. Then it shifted. She started tracking who showed up and who didn't." I nodded toward the evidence table. "I didn't know that until after she died. I found it on her nightstand under her Bible. There was a post-it on the cover. 'For Olivia, if they lie, use this.'" The judge blinked slowly. "Walk me through those last months," he said. "In your own words." So I did. I told him about the smell of antiseptic and chicken soup in our living room when the chemo knocked her flat. How I sat on the floor sorting pill organizers while my father couldn't handle hospitals, and Tyler claimed he was buried at work, but somehow always made happy hour. I described calling my commanding officer, asking for emergency leave, and spending nights in a stiff plastic recliner while Mom winced every time a nurse touched her IV. She was scared, I said. She was brave about it, but she was scared. She didn't want to die alone, so I promised her she wouldn't. And did you keep that promise? Weller asked. Yes, sir. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. I took one more week of leave at the end, I said. I slept in that chair. I heated up soup she could barely sip. I helped her to the bathroom, lifted her when the hospice aide wasn't there. Tyler came 3 times. He stayed 30 minutes each. Dad came more often, but not for long. He'd sit, complain about the parking, and leave right before it got hard. McMillan pushed back his chair. Objection, Your Honor, he said. Speculation as to my client's emotional state and motivations. It's a description of behavior, Counselor, Weller cut in. Overruled. Continue, Lieutenant. I looked down at my hands. Mom started writing it all down because she knew this was coming, I said quietly. She told me, they'll say you weren't here. They'll say I was confused. Don't argue. Just show them the pages. I gestured to Exhibit C. So I'm showing you the pages. Weller nodded once, as if receiving a report. Did your mother ever express doubt about her will? He asked. Never, I said. She told me she was leaving Dad the retirement accounts in the lake cabin. She was leaving me the house and her personal savings. And she was leaving Tyler. Her car. A faint, uncomfortable ripple moved through the room. Why? Weller asked. Did she say? Because, I said, in her words, your father loves things. Tyler loves rescue. You love responsibility. Give people what they love. My father snorted again. That's ridiculous. Mr. Carter, the judge warned. She never told me any of this, my father said, hot. We were married 32 years. You were also separated twice, I said before I could stop myself. And you refused counseling both times. She told you if you didn't want to plan with her, she'd plan anyway. His eyes snapped to me, full of fury. You ungrateful! The gavel cracked. Enough, Weller snapped. This is my courtroom, Mr. Carter, not your kitchen table. Something in my chest relaxed at that. Weller turned back to me, Badasai. Lieutenant, he said, your father claims you are unstable and irresponsible, that you abandoned your family and are now trying to take what doesn't belong to you. How do you respond to those specific accusations? I inhaled slowly, like before running a PT test. I left for the Navy at 18, I said. I sent money home when I could. I called. They didn't like hearing about deployments, so I stopped talking about it. That's distance. That's not abandonment. I glanced at my father, then at Tyler. I'm not perfect, I said. I missed birthdays. I missed Thanksgiving. I was on a destroyer halfway around the world. But when Mom got sick, I came. I stayed. I bathed her. I cleaned up after her when she was too embarrassed to ask. I listened when she was angry. And when she died, I was holding her hand. My voice wobbled just once on that last sentence. I let it. And your finances? Weller prompted. Any history of bankruptcy? Criminal charges? Substance abuse? Anything that would suggest you are unfit to manage property? No, sir, I said. My credit's clean. I've never missed a mortgage payment on my own condo. I'm responsible for government equipment and budgets bigger than this estate. McMillan tried again. Lieutenant, he said, you have a dangerous job. You could die anytime. Isn't it reckless to leave such significant assets tied up with someone who might not be here to handle them? I looked at him. With respect, Counselor, I said, everybody in this room could die anytime. That's why wills exist. The question isn't who lives the longest. It's who can be trusted while they're here. And you believe, he said, your mother trusted you more than the man she was married to and the son who lived down the road? I don't have to believe it, I said. She wrote it down, she signed it, she notarized it. That's what we're looking at. Weller's mouth twitched. Anything else, counselor? He asked McMillan. McMillan fluttered a hand. No further questions. Redirect? The judge asked Callahan. Callahan rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. Just 1 or 2 points, Your Honor. He approached the stand. Lieutenant Carter, he said, did your mother ever ask you to pressure her, to change her will, or to hide anything from your father? No, I said. She asked me to tell the truth if anyone lied. That's it. Did you ever discuss her exact bequests with her while your father was not present? She told me the outlines, I said. I told her it was her decision. I didn't ask for anything. Callahan nodded. No further questions, he said. Thank you, Lieutenant, Weller said. You may step down. The wood of the witness rail felt warm under my palm as I rose. My legs shook a little, but I made it back to my seat without stumbling. Counsel, the judge said, glancing at the clock, I've heard enough. Anything you can add at this point is going to be repetition, and I don't have the patience for theater. McMillan half rose. But Your Honor, Weller held up a hand. Sit, he said. McMillan sat. The judge stacked the files in front of him with deliberate care. My mother's will, the hospital log, the blue notebook, my service record. For the record, he said, tempering his tone, this case is not complicated. Painful, yes, but not complicated. He looked at my father. Your wife executed a valid will while fully competent, he said. She distributed her estate as she saw fit. You brought this petition on the premise that your daughter coerced or manipulated her. You have offered no evidence of that. None. He turned one palm up. On the contrary, every document, every neutral witness, and every log shows a consistent reality. Your wife trusted your daughter with her care and her legacy because your daughter showed up. You did not. My father flinched like every sentence was a blow. Therefore, Weller concluded, this court denies your petition to overturn the will. The will of Margaret Carter is admitted to probate as written. The primary residence and associated accounts pass to Lieutenant Olivia Carter. The lake cabin and designated retirement assets pass to you as listed. The vehicle passes to your son. A rustle went through the room like wind through dry leaves. I didn't breathe. Weller wasn't finished. Furthermore, he said, voice flattening, given the physical assault I witnessed in this courtroom and the pattern of hostility toward the beneficiary, this court will be issuing a temporary protective order prohibiting you, Mr. Carter, from harassing or attempting to coerce Lieutenant Carter regarding her inheritance. Any contact about this estate will go through counsel. Is that clear? My father's jaw worked. You can't keep me out of my own house, he spat. A few heads turned. The judge's gaze hardened. The house, he said, is in your late wife's name. It now belongs to your daughter. The words seemed to suck the air out of the room. You will vacate within 30 days as per the will's occupancy clause. If you wish to negotiate extended residence, that is between you and Lieutenant Carter as landlord and tenant. This court is not your referee. Silence fell like snow. My father stared at me as if I'd pulled the floor out from under him. You're throwing me out? He whispered. I didn't write the will, I said softly. Mom did. He shook his head, eyes wet and wild. You did this, he said. You turned her against me. Judge Weller gave a short, sharp rap of the gavel. Mr. Carter, he said, I suggest you spend less energy looking for someone to blame and more time considering why your wife and daughter trusted each other more than they could trust you. He stood. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel echoed through the paneled room, followed by the scrape of chairs, the low murmur of families, and my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. As people filed out, I stayed seated, staring at my hands. My mother's bracelet gleamed against my skin like a line finely drawn. When I looked up, my father was still there, standing in the aisle, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. He opened his mouth. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving the door swinging in his wake. Behind him, the winter light flooded in, and for the first time since I'd stepped off the plane, I realized what the judge's ruling really meant. I wasn't just inheriting a house. I was inheriting the power to choose who crossed its threshold. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled like coffee and old varnish. I pressed my back against the cool plaster and let my shoulders sag for the first time all day. People flowed past in little shoals, divorcees, landlords, kids with backpacks clinging to grandparents, everyone carrying their own verdicts on their faces. Mr. Callahan appeared at my elbow like he'd been doing this his whole life, which he had. "You did well," he said. My laugh scraped out dry. "I cried," I said. He gave me a sideways look. "Humans tend to do that when their mother dies and their father hits them," he said. "The judge noticed you didn't cry when you were attacked. He noticed you stayed on point." He tapped the folder under his arm. "He's ex-JAG, by the way. That helped." I blinked. He was... Callahan nodded toward the small framed photo on the clerk's wall. Weller, in an old uniform, younger, thinner, standing in front of a ship. "Retired 20 years ago," he said. "Still recognizes a service record when he sees one." We walked toward the elevators. "Now what?" I asked. "Now," he said, "we file the order, open the estate account, and start the timelines. There's paperwork. There's always paperwork." The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. My father was inside. He stood with his hands jammed in the pockets of his coat, tie askew, eyes swollen like he'd either cried or drunk too much. When he saw me, his jaw clenched. His gaze flicked to Callahan, then to the closed file in his hands like he wanted to rip it away. The door stayed open, waiting. No one moved. "You should take it," Callahan murmured. "I'll grab the stairs." I stepped in. The doors closed behind me with a soft sigh. For 2 floors, we said nothing, just the hum of cables and my heartbeat thudding in my ears. At the ground level, he finally spoke. "You going to throw me out on Christmas?" he said, eyes forward. He sounded smaller, tired. "It's January," I said. "You know what I mean." The doors opened. Cold air spilled in from the lobby. I looked at him. "I'm going to follow the will," I said. "You can stay for 30 days. After that, we'll figure something out. That's all I know right now." "We," he said, bitter. "Like you and your lawyer own my life." "No," I said quietly. "Like Mom and you wrote this will together. And I'm not going to pretend you didn't just because you don't like it now." He flinched. We stepped out. The lobby buzzed with voices and shuffling feet. A little boy with a backpack clung to his mother's hand as they passed between us, eyes wide at the sight of my uniform. Dad watched them go. "You really think I never did anything for you?" he muttered. "I fed you. I kept a roof over your head. I worked myself to the bone." "I know," I said, "and I'm grateful. But feeding your kid is the floor, Dad, not the finish line." His mouth opened, closed. 30 days, he said after a moment. "Then what? You going to put all my boxes on the lawn?" "I don't know," I said honestly. I'm not making promises I can't keep. Not to you. Not to myself." He shook his head, anger stirring again. "You've changed," he said. "The Navy. It made you cold." "The Navy made me honest," I said. "Mom's dying made me tired of pretending." Someone called my name. Tyler from across the lobby, waving his phone. "Liv," he shouted, "can we talk about the car?" I held up a hand. "Not now," I said, louder than I'd meant to. Please." He stopped, stung. Dad snorted. "Look at you," he said. "Big shot. Think you're better than us now?" "No," I said. "I think I'm done bleeding for people who stab me in public and call it love." The words surprised even me. But once they were out, I didn't regret them. We stood in that strip of marble and cold air, 2 people who shared a last name and almost nothing else. "I'll be out by the end of the month," he said finally. "Don't change the locks before then." He turned and walked toward the revolving doors. For a second, I almost called after him. Old muscle memory, chase, appease, smooth, apologize. I didn't. Instead, I walked the other way, out a side exit into the parking lot where my grandmother's old sedan waited under a dusting of frost. The sky was a hard, bright blue. My breath puffed white in front of me. I sat behind the wheel and stared at the steering column, fingers curled around cold plastic. and let the last hour replay in my head. The slap, the gavel, Weller's voice saying, "The house now belongs to your daughter." My daughter, my house, my responsibility. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "I didn't know he was going to hit you. Can we talk? I still think Mom wouldn't want us to fight like this." I stared at the screen for a long moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed, "I need time. I'm not cutting you off, but I'm not fixing this today." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. No reply. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and started the car. The engine coughed, caught, and steadied. As I pulled out of the courthouse lot, the town rolled past in small, familiar pieces. The diner where I'd bust tables, the park where Mom took us on Sundays, the hardware store that still had her handwritten flyers pinned to the bulletin board. By the time I turned onto our street, my jaw had unclenched. The house, my house, rose at the end of the cul-de-sac, sagging porch, chipped paint, gutter hanging like a broken collarbone. The lawn was dead and patchy. The flower beds Mom used to fuss over were just dirt. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, engine ticking. Then I got out, walked up the cracked path, and climbed the steps. The key felt different in the lock now, not stolen, not borrowed. Mine. The door swung open on the familiar smell of dust, old coffee, and the faint ghost of Mom's perfume. I closed it gently behind me and leaned my forehead against the wood. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" I whispered to the empty foyer. "You knew he'd come for it, and you made me the firewall." Silence answered. Just the soft hum of the fridge and the creak of the settling house. I straightened. The blue notebook lay on the entry table where I'd left it that morning, next to Mom's bracelet and the funeral program. I picked it up, slipped it under my arm, and walked deeper into the house. 30 days. 30 days for Dad to move out. 30 days for me to decide what kind of home this was going to be now that the person who loved me most wasn't in it. And the man who'd hurt us both would soon be gone. I stepped into the living room, where the afternoon light slanted across dust motes and water rings on the coffee table. For the first time in my life, I realized I had the power to decide who this house made space for, and who it didn't. The house felt louder when it was empty. Every floorboard creak, every heater hiss, every tick of the kitchen clock sounded like somebody whispering my name, and then remembering I was actually in charge now. The first thing I did was take the will binder and my blue notebook into Mom's old sewing room and clear a space on the desk. Her pincushion still sat there, needles bristling like a little metal sea urchin. I set the binder down beside it. "Command post," I murmured. In the Navy, we always started with an assessment. What do you have? What's broken? What can be saved? So I did that, room by room. In Dad's office, the damage was all paper. Credit card statements, overdue notices, home equity loan documents with his signature looping bigger every year, as if he could bluff the numbers into obeying him. I stacked them into piles: debt, delinquent, disaster, and logged totals in my notebook. In the kitchen, the damage was smaller but deeper. Mom's recipe cards warped with water rings, her favorite mug chipped. The 4 company plates shoved haphazardly into a cabinet, one cracked in half. In the dining room, the damage was invisible but everywhere. That was where he'd practiced speeches, where we listened to his pronouncements about Eric's future and my phases. The chairs still remembered who usually sat at the head. By the time my phone rang, the sun had dropped behind the trees. Golden light leaked across the floor like spilled honey. I checked the screen. "Mom," I said, and answered. Her voice was tight. "Where are you?" "Here," I said, "at the house." "I thought you'd—" "Go back to base," she said, like I was a stray cat she wasn't sure she'd be allowed to keep. "Your father said—" "My father isn't in charge of this house anymore," I said gently, legally or otherwise. A silence. I could hear her breathing. "He told me what happened," she said eventually. "At the lawyer's. He said you made it sound worse than it was, that the judge took your side because of your uniform." "I didn't make him hit me," I said. "The judge took Grandma's side and Mom's. The will is their signature too." He's scared, she whispered. He won't call it that, but I can hear it. He doesn't know where he'll go if you. He has 30 days, I said. Maybe more. I'm not throwing him on the street, but I'm not signing away what Grandma trusted me with to fix the mess he made. The heater clicked on. Warm air gathered around my ankles. Do you want to come over? I asked. Just you. Another long pause. I don't want to make him angrier, she said. I closed my eyes. You realize, I said quietly, that him being angry at me is the most familiar thing in this house. It's not new. Her breath hitched. I'll come tomorrow, she said. He's out. I don't know when he'll be back. Okay, I said. I'll be here. After we hung up, I sank into one of the dining chairs and opened Grandma's blue notebook to a blank page. On the top line, I wrote, non-negotiables. 1. I will not sign away the penthouse. 2. I will not assume Dad's debts. 3. I will not be hit again by anyone. 4. I will protect the house and properties the way I protect my sailors, firmly, fairly. 5. I will not use this to humiliate them, but I also won't cushion the truth. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. I was still staring at that list when the front door opened and shut. Dad's footsteps were slower than usual. He came into the dining room like a man walking into a briefing he didn't want to attend. We looked at each other across the table. You changed the thermostat, he said. It was 62 degrees in here, I said. I turned it up to 68. You can't afford a lot of things, I said, but I'm not freezing in a house that isn't even on your balance sheet. He flinched like I'd slapped him back. For a moment, I almost apologized. Then I remembered the red print stamped across his loan letters, the echo of his palm in that conference room, the way his face had looked when Judge Weller said, "The house is not yours to mortgage, Mr. Morgan." He dropped into the chair opposite me, his shoulders sagged under a coat that had been impressive once when I was small. What are you going to do? He asked. No bravado, just that. I'm going to follow the will, I said. I'm going to get the taxes current, fix the roof, sort the properties. I'll let you stay if you contribute, or we can find a plan that isn't another loan. I'm 62, he said. Nobody's hiring old men. They hired you every time you walked into a bank for another line of credit, I said. You're not helpless. You're just used to being catered to. His jaw worked. That's not fair, he said. Fair, I said. Was Grandma sitting here with you, offering to help you budget, and you ignoring her because you'd rather feel powerful than responsible? Silence dropped between us. He stared at the tablecloth, fingers whirring a loose thread. What do you want from me? He said at last. A confession? You want me to say I did it all wrong so you can feel big? I thought about that. No, I said. I want you to admit you hurt me, and Eric, and Mom, and Grandma. I want you to stop acting like this house just happened around you, and I want you to stop reaching for things you haven't earned, then telling yourself the world cheated you. His throat worked once, twice. I did hurt you, he said, barely audible. I know that. I don't know how to fix it. You start by not making it worse, I said. No more schemes, no more loans, no more slaps. You live in reality. Or you find somewhere else to live. He nodded once, like a man taking fire orders. Can I at least... He cleared his throat. Can I at least stay until spring? It's cold in the market. We'll see, I said. Depends on whether you act like a tenant or a bomb. His laugh came out startled and painful. I raised you to be tough, he said. No, I said. You raised me to be afraid. I chose tough all by myself. He closed his eyes. For the first time, I saw how tired he was. Not just from the day, or the hearing, or the bills, but from 40 years of being the man who always had a story, never a solution. I'm going to bed, he said quietly. You do whatever you need to do. He pushed himself up and shuffled down the hall. I listened to his door click shut. Then I opened Grandma's notebook again and wrote a new line at the bottom of my list. 6. I will not let his fear decide who I get to be in this house. I didn't know yet what part 2 of our family story would look like, but for the first time, I believed it didn't have to look like part 1. And that belief felt like a door I could finally walk through. Spring came in sideways, snow one day, mud the next, crocuses punching through frost like they had someplace important to be. By March, the house looked less like a foreclosure ad and more like somewhere people might want to live. I hired a roofer with the estate account, paid the back taxes, and spent 2 weekends scraping old wallpaper with paint flecks in my hair, while Mom played old Motown records on her phone and quietly hummed along. Dad stayed, not because I caved, but because he did something I'd never seen him do before. He went to a financial counselor, brought home worksheets, and actually listened. The first time he handed me a printed budget with his notes on it, his hand shook a little. "I know you don't owe me this," he said, "but could you look it over?" I took it. His numbers weren't great. They were honest. "That's a start," I said. "You can't fix what you won't write down." He nodded. "Your grandmother used to say that," he said. "Get it on paper, Tom. She was always writing things down." "I know," I said, tapping the blue notebook in my pocket. She taught me. Eric got a job, no fanfare, no big speeches. Just one afternoon, he knocked on the door wearing a grease-stained polo and smelled like motor oil. "Shop on Route 12 hired me," he muttered. "Changing tires? It's something." "It's work," I said. "That's more than you had before." He lingered in the doorway. "Look, about the house," he said. "I was an ass. I assumed it would go the way Dad said, like everything else around here." "Grandma wasn't everything else," I said. "She saw us, both of us. The difference is, she saw what we could be, not just what we wanted." He looked at his shoes. "I'm trying," he said. "I know," I said. "Keep trying." We didn't hug, but he came in and stayed for dinner. That was something. By the time November rolled around, the dining room had changed. The water rings were sanded out. The table was restained. The chairs were reupholstered with fabric Mom picked. Sturdy, warm, not trying too hard. I almost booked Thanksgiving somewhere else out of habit. A friend's place, the base, anywhere but here. Instead, I sent a group text. "Dinner at the house, 6 p.m. If you can come, great. If you can't, that's okay too. No pressure." Mom replied with 3 heart emojis and "I'll bring pies." Eric wrote, "I'll be there. Do you need me to help set up?" Dad didn't respond. I set 3 extra plates anyway. That afternoon, I pulled on my khaki uniform. Not dress whites, not full medals, just the everyday version that still meant something to me, and stood on the porch, watching my breath curl into the cold. I thought about all the houses where women sat at tables they didn't feel they belonged at. All the rooms they'd been made small in. All the inheritance conversations that turned daughters into afterthoughts. Then I looked at the brass doorknob under my hand and the fresh coat of paint on the trim and the deed in the lockbox that said my name. Grandma's voice brushed the back of my mind for her. She will know what to do. "Trying," I whispered. "One holiday at a time." Cars pulled up, tires crunching on the drive. Mom came up the walk with pies and a scarf wound around her neck, eyes bright. Eric followed, clutching a bag of store-bought rolls and looking like he'd just passed a surprise inspection. Behind them, slower, Dad climbed out of his sedan. No blazer, no puffed-out chest, just a charcoal sweater that hung a little loose and a paper grocery bag of cranberry sauce and canned green beans. He stopped at the foot of the steps. "I brought something," he said. "Looks that way," I said. He shifted. "It's not much," he said, "but I wanted to contribute. I don't want to just sit in the house you pay for and we pay for," I corrected. "The estate account pays for. Grandma pays for. We're just trying not to waste it." He swallowed. "Right," he said. "We, if you still include me in that." I looked at him. Really looked. He had more gray at his temples, deeper lines around his mouth. A tiredness in his eyes that hadn't been there when he stood in that conference room and swung at me. "Come inside," I said. "Dinner's getting cold." At the table, he didn't take the head. He sat halfway down between Mom and Eric and waited until everyone else had filled their plates before he reached for anything. Halfway through the meal, he put down his fork, cleared his throat, and looked around as if giving a briefing. Old habits. Before we, you know, pie, he glanced at Mom. I want to say something. The room went very still. He looked at me. I'm sorry, he said. No jokes, no qualifiers, just those words hanging in the warm light. I'm sorry I hit you, he said. I'm sorry I made you feel smaller than him. He nodded toward Eric. I'm sorry I acted like your promotions didn't count. I was scared of a lot of things, and instead of saying that, I acted like a bully. He swallowed. And thank you, he added, voice rough, for not throwing me out when you had every right to. Your grandfather saw you clearer than I did. I'm trying to catch up. My throat burned. I set my fork down and folded my hands together so I wouldn't reach for him out of habit. Thank you, I said. For saying it, that's a start. Mom's eyes shone. Eric stared at his plate like it was suddenly fascinating. Mr. Henderson, the neighbor I'd invited so he wouldn't spend Thanksgiving alone, clapped once, softly, then pretended he hadn't. We ate pie. We told stories about Grandma. We argued gently about football and laughed at the same old jokes. But this time, something was different. The air, the pressure, the absence of that old invisible rule that everything had to bend around one man's pride. After everyone left, I stood alone in the dining room, hands resting on the back of Grandma's old chair. The house was quiet, not hollow, not tense, just resting. On the sideboard, the blue notebook lay open where I'd left it weeks ago. Under non-negotiables, I added one last line. 7. I will build a life where respect is the rule, not a favor. I closed the notebook and slid it back into its drawer. Then I walked to the front door, stepped onto the porch, and looked out at the dark street, porch lights glowing like small, stubborn stars. For the first time since the will reading, I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. The house behind me was still flawed, still full of memories, still a work in progress. So were we. But the deed was in my name. The boundaries were mine. And the girl who'd walked into that conference room, hoping to be chosen, had learned that sometimes the real inheritance is simply this. You get to decide where the story goes next. I pulled the door closed gently. Thanks, Grandpa, I whispered into the warm, quiet hallway. I've got it from here. End.